Hello, everyone. Today I want to tell you a story about cheating. Let's start now. I arrived home early, got an email, and saw her with her lover at the office Christmas party I happened to drive past the motel and noticed her car parked outside the room. There must be other ways for a cuckold husband to learn of. His wife's adultery, at least you would believe so, but perhaps not perhaps there. Are just a half dozen ways for a man to realize that his marriage has failed. I know that in my case, I was so in love with my wife of 10 years that it took a lightning strike to comprehend what had been going on between her and her 4. The previous 6 months I had no idea Abigail and I met in college during our sophomore year and were instantly attracted to each other. She had thick blonde hair, blue eyes, a lovely face, and a slim physique with long legs. In short, she was ideal, at least to me, but despite everything else about her, I fell in love with her right away. She was brilliant, simpering, and entertaining. I could talk with her for hours about anything in the world. We became best friends, and after Abigail and I had been dating for 3 months, we began to open up in new ways. If you understand, at that time, it was the pinnacle of my existence. It was awkward from that point forward. I no longer doubted Abigail, and I'd be together forever, or, as it turned out, 10 years. My name is Alexander, but everybody calls me Edward. I was born and reared in a medium-sized Midwestern town. My height is 6 feet, and I weigh 187 pounds. I'm a fairly attractive dude with brown eyes and sandy hair. I'm a contractor by trade. I own a modest company with a permanent team of 5 individuals. We mostly handle interior remodeling for individuals who can afford it, and our work is deemed superb. Abigail teaches music at a nearby high school, and we both earn a fair living, have a stunning home, and as we are both in our 30s, we hope to start a family in the near future. As previously stated, we have had a lovely first 10 years of marriage. We cuddled every night. It was an unbreakable rule, and every morning as I awoke next to Abigail, I marveled at her beauty and how fortunate I was to have her as my wife. I can honestly say that while I would prefer to live every day with her, if it meant giving my life for her, I would do it. Without hesitation, I definitely should have used the past tense for that last sentence, because something so unexpected and emotionally overpowering happened to me that I still can't say I've entirely recovered from it. As a Midwest contractor, we do most of our work in the spring, summer, and fall. People simply do not like having the interior of their homes pulled apart when it is 5 hours outside and 3 feet of snow on the ground. Abigail and I usually took vacations during Christmas and New Year's, as well as spring break in the summer. When I was working, Abigail would occasionally take a week off to visit family, go shopping with her 2 sisters, or take a couple of summer courses to support her teaching degree. Our favorite winter getaway was always somewhere warm, and in the winter of our doom, we chose an all-inclusive resort in the Bahamas. 2 weeks in paradise for the 2 of us to reconnect physically and spiritually. However, I quickly saw how foolish that idea was. First and foremost, I should clarify that when Abigail and I boarded the plane in Minneapolis, I had no notion, and I would have branded you a liar and spit in your face if you had dared to suggest that there was anything wrong with our marriage. We were an ideal pair. We were so madly in love and completely connected in every aspect that it felt like we were one person fused into 2 bodies. Our bond was so strong that nothing in heaven or earth could separate us. I think I forgot there was a heck, even though I didn't realize it at the time. I was standing on the verge of the abyss, ready to plunge into the boiling depths. The first time I sensed something was when I went through security at Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport. The line was long. A lot of people are attempting to go from harsh cold to tropical warmth. Abigail and I waited in line to pass through the scanners. I observed a man in line next to us look at Abigail. It was not unusual. My wife is a showy woman, and men frequently cast lustful looks at her, but this appeared different, as if he was. Attempting to catch her attention, I wanted to learn more, so I feinted to look at my boarding pass while RBs. Observing the guy from the corner of my eye, his stares at her were furtive, to say the least, and then I caught it. Abigail gave him a short glance and a barely detectable flick of her hand, as if to say, "Not now." He smiled and nodded, and I almost lost my food. I was stunned. It was then that I realized they knew each other. How I didn't know, however, that understanding served as a red flag. When we passed through security, I kept an eye on them, and neither of them attempted to make contact again, I knew. I had become silent, but Abigail didn't notice. Apparently her mind was preoccupied with something else. I prayed. This man, whatever he was, wasn't on our flight, but when we boarded and took our seats, I realized I was mistaken. He was. Sitting in an aisle seat about 15 seats ahead of us, Abigail also insisted on an aisle seat in our row, which struck me as weird. That never occurs. She always prefers to sit by the window, but not. This time I inquired as to what was wrong, as I had scheduled a window seat for her ahead of time, leaving myself in the middle, but she merely stated that she did not enjoy her meal and did not wish to bother anyone if she needed to use the restroom. I asked the woman on the aisle seat whether she minded taking the window seat. When I explained that my wife had stomach issues, she immediately consented, and the exchange was completed. I don't typically have trouble sleeping on planes, and the long flight from Minneapolis to Miami would have allowed me to do so, but given my heightened anxiousness, there was no way I was going to sleep on this flight, even if I pretended to. We put our bags in the overhead rubbish can, and Abigail stowed her handbag under the seat in front of her. Once we were in the air, I put my twin's baseball cap over my head and pretended to sleep. I let myself enough space to keep an eye on Abigail. After 15 minutes, she peeked up at me, checked to see if I was still asleep, and then got up and walked down the aisle to the washroom. I moved to my seat so I could view the entire aisle, and I noticed that as she passed the seat occupied by what I presumed was her acquaintance, she reached out as if to hang on and softly touched the man's shoulder, more evidence that there was something between them, and it wasn't just coincidence I saw. They didn't glance at each other, and Abigail went to the restroom. When she emerged a few minutes later, she glanced right at him, and he rose up and approached her when they met in the aisle, instead of one of them turning aside to let the other pass. They came face to face and paused for a moment. He placed his hand on her waist, and she talked to him. They both smiled warmly as she proceeded to her aisle seat that was. And that's all I needed to know, that these two had known each other for a while and were clearly close on some level at the time. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My great marriage was in serious danger and may very possibly terminate. I became so upset that I had to turn away from Abigail as she sat down and fastened her seatbelt. How could she have done this to me, to us? How long has it been going on? Who was this individual? And how far had their relationship progressed? For the rest of the flight, I attempted to make sense of what I had seen and prayed that he would not be on our aircraft to Nassau, but I knew he would disappoint me. I turned out to be correct. As soon as Abigail and I entered the plane, I noticed him 5 rows behind us. He was reading the in-flight magazine and gave us no eye on as we took our seats. Abigail, who was clearly no longer experiencing stomach difficulties, took her normal seat by the window. The journey to Nassau was uneventful, and after landing, we picked up our luggage, rented a car, and traveled to the resort. Abigail texted as I was driving, "Who are you texting with?" "Just letting my parents and sisters know we made it okay. Maybe I thought, but I want to see for myself. Isn't it strange how suspicions snowball? Our accommodation was beautiful, with a balcony facing the beach and one of the pools. As we unpacked, I understood I needed to make a statement if I wanted to win back my wife, so I approached Abigail and said, "Do you realize how much I love you? I love you too, sweetie." She described a peculiar glow in her eyes, as if she weren't in the room with me. "I would never do anything bad for you. Don't you, Abigail?" She flinched slightly. "I understand, Edward, and I know you would never hurt me or our lovely marriage," I informed her, and she flinched again. And I noticed moisture trickling into her eyes. "Of course, do you realize I won't?" But she did not glance at me. She simply stared at the floor. I understood then that I would have probably lost the battle if she hadn't already done so. I knew she'd soon give herself to another man. I let her go and dashed to the restroom, hoping I didn't lose her before I got there. I sat in the restroom for a few minutes, gathering my thoughts and asking myself the same questions over and over. How did this occur? What did I do to lead her into the arms of another man? Why hadn't I seen anything a few weeks or months prior? But most importantly, what can I do to prevent her from entirely wrecking our lives? Is it too late? I cleansed my face and left the bathroom. Abigail stood there with an odd expression on her face. "My God, Stu, I just had my period and didn't have anything with me." "What about my menstruation, Edward? It's only just started." "But you received it a week ago." "How could it restart? I do not know. However, this does not always happen. Perhaps the exhilaration of the vacation caused it. I need to walk down to the gift shop and buy some tampons." She departed, closing the door behind her. My initial impression was that perhaps this was a good thing. It would slow down her romance with her boyfriend, whoever he was. My second thought was, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense. She had never experienced anything like this in all of our years together. She was on birth control pills, and her periods were always consistent like clockwork, so why would she make it up unless she felt her period would stop me from chasing her, allowing her to devote all of her love and passion to her new man? That's how it should be. And if it is, she isn't the woman I married. No one can be so devious and wicked. She must despise me because she let me organize and pay for this vacation so she could take me out of her life and give everything she has to a man I've never met. I felt totally lost. I felt like I was going mad. Who was this woman I had been madly in love with for over 10 years? As I looked around the room, I noticed that she had left her cell phone near the television. I turned it on, not knowing whether she had changed the passcode, and discovered that she had not. She made another error. I checked her messages and read the latest from Anthony Eisner. I went back to the beginning of the thread, which started when we were traveling to the resort. Anthony: "Hey, honey, I can't wait to have you over. Abigail, you little brat, you nearly got us caught by Stu at the airport, Anthony." "I couldn't resist, Abigail. I almost kissed you on the plane." As we stood in the aisle, Abigail: "Edward was fast sleeping, so you could have, but it would appear horrible to others. I've got to go. We are almost there." Once we arrived in our resort room, the two began their talk. Anthony: "I am in the lobby. Are you here yet?" Abigail: "is in my room. Edward is in the bathroom. He's acting strangely." Anthony: "Who cares? When are you going to dump Stu so I may have you for myself? I told you from the beginning that I couldn't and wouldn't do it, Tony. Edward is a great husband. He loves me, looks after me, and provides me a life that you could never provide." Anthony: "You know what I'm better at, Abigail." "Ha ha, yes, you are better at that, but I need more than that. And Edward offers me that Edward and I are preparing to start a family, so the next 2 weeks are exclusively for you. Darling, I promised Steed that I'd stop taking birth control pills when we returned home, but I actually stopped almost 3 weeks ago, so you have a chance to give me your baby, which Edward will raise as his own." Anthony, you are so cruel, Jan, but I adore it. But what if he makes you pregnant, Abigail? I'll tell him I got my period again, and interestingly enough, it will last the entire time. We're on vacation. Anthony, are you sure he'll purchase that? Abigail, of course he is. He loves me and knows I would never lie to him besides. When we get home, I will make it up to him. Anthony is incredibly stupid. What a loser. I stood there in full disbelief. Began to change her phone and then stopped. There is a possibility that I will be able to utilize these. Communications as evidence in the divorce course, I began to switch her phone to my own and then realized screw. Her my phone has all of my personal information on it. She created this situation on her own. Allow her to try to. Get out of it. So I retained both of our phones. I assumed it wouldn't be long before she realized her phone was missing. But by then, I would be long gone. I could feel bile rising in my throat, which caused me to gag. I strolled up to the window and gazed out at the breathtaking Caribbean Sea. I was the happiest man in the planet 8 hours ago, gearing up for 2 weeks of romance in the tropics with the love of my life, my wife, and my soulmate, and suddenly my world was collapsing around me. I had never felt more alone, overwhelmed and enraged in my life. I wanted to punish and destroy them both for making such a sad fool of me. Fortunately, the reasonable half of my brain eventually took over. Divorce was inevitable. There was no way I could stay with the unfaithful wife who was also my loving wife, but I wanted more than that. I sought vengeance. Looking out the window, I noticed them in the water, arms tightly wrapped around each other. I wanted to throw up, but instead I took a deep breath and reached for my DVR, which I had purchased particularly for this trip, but was now being used to film their actions. Abigail must not have looked out the window of our room while unpacking, or she would have noticed the pool right in front of her. The camera has a reasonable zoom, so I was able to obtain some good close-up shots. I despised looking at it, but I'd use it against them later. I needed a plan. Quickly, but my stomach was cramping, and my mind was foggy. Then it came to me how she planned to spend time with her lover. If I was present, they must have a plan to keep me occupied while they are together while I was thinking about it. A simple concept came to mind. Abigail planned to spend 2 weeks with her partner Anthony in order to become pregnant, and I wanted vengeance, so why not do it now rather than waiting and jeopardizing their plans first? I had to think out how they would keep me engaged. While they entertained each other, I was still taking notes when I noticed them kissing once more, and Abigail hastily turned and left. She'd be back in our room any minute, and I needed to keep my emotions in check, so I walked back into the bathroom and turned on the shower to attempt to relax. If she asked why, I'd simply explain that it was to help me relax after the flight, and I wanted to get rid of the airline odor. 5 minutes later, I heard the door to our room open and close. "I am back," she exclaimed. "I brought us water. Great, I'll get out of the shower in a minute." Why did she bring us water? The resort provides bottled water in all of its rooms, and then it struck me she was going to give me sleeping medication, and this was going to be it. I began to consider what I would do if I did not drink the water she had bought me. She'll know that if I drink the water, I could suspect something, and she'll become this. I will go out, and she and her partner will return to her room. What to do? I switched off the shower and carefully dried off, unsure what to do. Abigail knocked on the door. "Are you okay? You've been inside for a while?" Her voice was filled with concern. I couldn't help but wonder if she was concerned about me or if she was anxious about being late for an important date when I opened the door and saw her standing by the bed drinking from a water bottle. My wrath flared up again, but I battled to keep my cool. She extended the second one to me, and I noticed it was already open. With the current climatic change, we must drink water. She stared me in the eyes before immediately looking away. I took the bottle and pretended to take a big swallow, Before turning and walking back to the bathroom quickly, but silently, I spit the water into the sink and emptied. The bottle then took one of the water bottles from the bathroom counter. When I returned to the room, I filled the empty bottle that Abigail had given me. She was busy unpacking, organizing items in drawers, and hanging clothes in the closet, so I was confident she hadn't noticed me splash the water or fill the bottle until I was out of the bathroom. I continued to sip water. I looked around our room and saw that she had spread out a crimson dress. Is that what you plan to wear to dinner? If we can't get into it, it will be pointless. Do you realize how much I adore this dress? Saying that made me understand she was dressing for him, not me. I brought it, so I may as well wear it. She smiled. Aren't you fatigued after all? The traveling, you must be fatigued, Bingo. I thought this jackass had really watered me down, but how would I play it off? I needed additional evidence of their affair, so I claimed to want to sleep. I took another sip of water and lowered my gaze as if I were fatigued. In truth, I felt as if I had just consumed several cans of Red Bull. My heart was racing in my chest, and I had to use all of my willpower to pretend to be asleep. Now that you mention it, I am a little tired. What time should we get ready for dinner? I inquired a little casually. They won't begin dinner for a few hours. Why don't you lie down and relax for a while? I will wake you up when it is time to get ready. She spoke with such sincerity that I almost believed her. I yawned. Okay. Sweetheart, I could use the remainder. Just don't let me sleep too much. I'd like to spend as much time with you as possible. I really love you. I watched her flinch, like if I had struck a nerve. I adore you too, she spoke. With little conviction, I lay down on the bed and gently pretended to fall asleep. Soon I was dozing lightly, and I heard Abigail take out her phone to make a call. Oh, it worked. He's passed out. How long will he sleep? Then we spend the whole night together? She giggled, and I almost gibbered, but I managed to keep the appearance of being asleep. Meet me at the Sandpiper bar in 1 hour. I'd like to freshen up. She giggled. Again you are. Very awful. I cannot wait, lover, bye. She hung up and went on with her preparations for the big night. I looked at her, hardly opening my eyes. I was becoming angry again, but I did my best not to show it. She continued to get ready before entering the bathroom and beginning to shower. I knew she'd be in there for about 10 minutes, so as soon as I heard the shower door close, I stood up and went for her handbag. I began digging through it for sleeping tablet or whatever she had placed in the water bottle she had given me. I stumbled upon a pill bottle without a label stating what was inside it. I opened it and found about a dozen little yellowish capsules. This must have been what she placed in my drink, so I gently shook out roughly 5 tablets and placed the pill bottle back in my purse. I then wrapped the pills in a Kleenex and placed them in the pocket of my shorts. As I walked back to bed, I heard her turn off the water in the shower. I lay down and dozed off as she finished getting ready for her date. It took her another 45 minutes to prepare, but as soon as she was out the door, I was up and dressed as quickly as I could. As I lay there, I had time to create a strategy. I needed additional video footage of them together to derail their plans for the rest of the trip. I wasn't sure how I was going to pull it off, but I knew they'd both be in a bad situation. The final step was to come home a few days before our trip was meant to end and start divorcing proceedings I intended to finish with Abigail before she could do anything to halt or slow me down, such as emptying our bank accounts and canceling all of our credit cards. No, I was meant to be doing that, not her. As soon as I got dressed, I grabbed the video camera I had used earlier that day and walked out the door. It may operate in low light at least that's what the commercial stated. I'd have to figure that out on my way to the pub. The resort wasn't particularly large, and there were only two bars, both facing the ocean, however Sandpiper was. The bigger of the two, and featured a dance floor, I was able to pick a strategic place behind some low palms that provided a full view of the bar while keeping me hidden. My camera's zoom lens allowed me to capture a high-quality movie. The bar wasn't very full, so I could easily see my victim. She was wearing that stupid red dress that I used to adore, but now it filled me with rage and contempt. He placed his arms around her, and it took all of my self-control and strength not to run up and kill the jerk. I needed to remind myself that I was here to gather evidence, not to end up in jail. I began taping the two of them acting like lovers in the Caribbean. They laughed and kissed like lovers do, as Abigail and I did after. About an hour, the DJ switched on the music, and everyone began dancing after watching them dance on the dance floor. For another hour, I couldn't handle it any longer, and was prepared to return to my room alone. Then I spotted the two of them rapidly leaving the dance floor. I cautiously followed them, keeping my distance so as not to be spotted. They soon arrived at his room, which was in the back of the facility. It was smaller than ours, located on the first floor, and had no view of the water. This person must have a tight budget. I thought they walked into his room, and I hurriedly crept closer to see if I could peep inside. Luckily, the drapes weren't entirely closed, and the window was slightly ajar, allowing me to hear and film their chat. I was videotaping everything. It was already midnight, and I was already thinking she was going to leave him to be with me. But then I overheard their talk. "Are you certain these drugs are safe?" she inquired with considerable anxiety in her voice. "How touching. Do not worry about him, baby. He'll sleep for at least 6 more hours. He may awaken with a mild headache, but nothing more. You used only 1 pill." "Correct, yeah, only 1. Why, what would the 2 have done? I do not want him to feel." Awful jerk laughed. "No, don't worry. If you gave him 2, he would pass out for at least 12 hours. No, just keep giving him 1 before bedtime. We can spend every night together. I hope you'll be pregnant by the time we depart. Here's an extra. Now that's a key card for my room. If you can get away from him throughout the daytime, call me and we'll meet again here then." They both laughed, which made me so angry that I spewed up. I'd heard and seen enough for one night, so I discreetly departed and returned to my bed. Now I had to figure out how to ruin them both and make them experience the misery they'd caused me. It was evident that she planned to spend every night with him, so the first thing I was going to do was change my plans back in my room. I reviewed what I had written down, as difficult as it was too. I began to devise a strategy that I believed would thoroughly wreck their fun. First, I had to figure out how to separate them so I could see what the boy in love was up to. I chose to take him alone, maybe even give them water, as Abigail did to me, and then beat the snot out of them while they are asleep. He would be unable to identify his attacker, and that way I could get away with it. Now the difficulty remained, how do I separate the two? That's when I came up with the notion of treating Abigail to a spa day. The resort offered massages, facials, and even cosmetics. It would be simple to purchase a package deal and present it to her as a gift to demonstrate how much I adored her. If she tried to refuse, I would tell her the money was non-refundable and create a massive guilt trip on her to get her to go, as she has done with me before. There was no way she could refuse my gift, and it would keep her occupied for at least a few hours that would allow me plenty of time to give my boyfriend the flogging he deserved. I changed into shorts and returned to bed. I laid there sleepless. I could only think of the two of them together and how I was going to kick those jerks. Abigail returned to the room in the morning, but it was only around 5 in. She softly changed her clothing, climbed into bed and nestled against me, I felt like shoving her away again, but I stayed motionless, as if unconscious, waiting for the proper moment to awaken a bit. After 700 a.m., I began to stir, and gradually, fain to wake awake, Abigail was fast asleep, so I got up and had a brief shower before going in quest of a spa eye. Was hoping they'd open early so I could get her a package that would keep her busy long enough for me to finish some tasks. I also wanted to see if I could book a trip home late the next morning or early afternoon. It didn't take me long to discover the spa and confirmed that it was open. I walked inside to see what package discounts they were offering. A friendly young woman behind the counter assisted me in selecting a package offer. I was more concerned in how long the treatments would take than in what they were, for after selecting a package that lasted approximately 3 hours, I inquired as to the earliest time she could book it. The woman checked her computer, and it said 2 p.m. This was her first accessible time. I thought about it for a bit before deciding to grab a box to surprise my wife. That concludes the matter. I went out to explore the grounds, assuming Abigail needed some rest after the previous night with her lover had likely worn her. I returned to the room at 9 a.m. and found her still sleeping soundly, so I rummaged through her purse and discovered her cell phone. I examined her text messages and saw one from him that he had sent within the last hour. Anthony, you were fantastic last night. Is there any prospect of getting away from Stu to have some fun throughout the day? My anger was returning, but I suppressed it. I was terrific at it, but I realized the end was close. Abigail snarled, so I put down the phone and softly kissed her forehead. Good morning, sleepyhead. I apologize for falling asleep last night and upsetting our dinner arrangements, but I have a surprise for you. She grinned and yawned. What type of surprise? I booked you a spa day to make amends for last night and to show you how much I adore you even in my drowsy state. I watched her flinch slightly, and her eyes were filled with uncertainty. At that point, I realized she was doubting if she truly loved me. I gazed in her eyes. Is everything okay? You do not like my gift? No, I love it. I only wish you had asked me first. She smiled weakly. If I had it, would not have come as a big surprise. Look, you don't have to rush to the spa right now. I made a reservation for 2 p.m. so that we can spend time together. Okay? She nodded. You are extremely thoughtful. Thank you. When she kissed my cheek, I believed I could smell sailors in her breath. What a dishonest little fool. So why don't you get cleaned up and we go to breakfast? I got out of bed when she sat up. She then got out of bed, grabbed her purse, and proceeded to the bathroom. I understood what she was up to, but I didn't want to raise her suspicions, so I went to check out the window and noticed an unusual scene. Anthony was sitting by the pool, speaking with a couple of young women and glancing at his phone. Then I noticed him typing and quickly put his phone aside. She must have informed him of my unexpected gift, but he didn't seem unhappy about it. His focus quickly returned to the two women, who appeared to be laughing merrily at something one of them had said. Then he gestured with his hand, and the three of them went out of sight. It occurred to me that Anthony might be preparing backup plans in case Abigail was unable to join us for some fun after lunch that may be really beneficial. Abigail and I were at the buffet table about an hour later, filling our plates with food. More specifically, I was loading my plate while she was having fruit and coffee. I'm not hungry, baby. Do you have your period? I inquired. Yes, I guess so. I don't feel like eating. She shifted her gaze away. I couldn't help but wonder what Anthony had said in his message, which appeared to disturb her. It didn't matter because my scheme appeared to have had the desired effect on them, or at least her. After breakfast, we went for a walk on the beach to see the water. I carried my camera with me and photographed the beach palm trees and Abigail. She would smile sweetly and I would say things like how beautiful she was and what a wonderful mother she would be then she. Flinched, her expression showed signs of uncertainty and guilt. What is wrong? With you, baby, are you all right? I could tell she was starting to, it's not me. Feeling guilty, I'm fine. I'm just a little fatigued. Do you mind if I return to my hotel and take a nap before? Hitting the spa, sure, no issue. I understand how unpleasant it is to be on. Vacation, while also having your period, go lay down. And after your spa treatments, I'll be waiting for you in. Your room, I am confident it will benefit you. She turned, and walked back towards the spa, not even kissing me. Goodbye. Well, I'm going to blow her off for a long time. The only thing left to do is find Anthony and make him pay as I. Continued going down the beach, lost in my thoughts. I noticed two couples approaching me and the woman I recognized from my morning conversation with Anthony. They were now joined by two enormous men who appeared to be Vikings. Defenders. As I approached, I began to hear their talk. Come on, sweetheart, don't do that. You knew Dave and I wanted to go fishing, and they had 2 spots open. We'll get back before dinner, sure you. Guys can go do anything you want while we're stuck here at the motel. There are so many things you could do here. Babe, go. Shopping in town or relax by the pool or at the beach. You may even use the gym they offer here. Do you think I'm fat, you? Should start chatting. No, darling, that was not what I meant. It's just that there are so many things you can do here. That's all. As they passed me on their way back to the resort, I could tell he was losing it, but he persisted to no effect. After roaming around the beach for a time, I decided to return and find out what the boy in love was up to. I was concerned Abigail had missed her spa appointment and was with him, but if that's the case, I might be able to acquire some additional footage of them together. I went around the spa for over an hour before finding myself outside. Anthony's room, there were voices within, but Abigail was not one of them. I carefully prepared my camera and approached the window. It was really dangerous because it was daytime and there could be a lot of people passing by who could see me. I figured it would be better to set up the camera on the sill of the window facing the room and let it record on its own. I proceeded down the walkway and located a vantage point from where I could monitor the entrance and see who was coming out. The time passed slowly, but my patience were rewarded. The 2 women I saw with Anthony this morning in the pool and then on the beach with those 2 males emerged from his room. They were grinning and beaming as if they were in on some inside joke. When they were out of sight, I went to get my camera and returned to the room. Abigail wouldn't return from her spa treatments for another hour, giving me plenty of time to go over and everything I had captured. As soon as I returned to the hotel, I took out my laptop and downloaded all of the films I had taken since we arrived. The most of it was dedicated to Abigail, but I also went over what I had just filmed of the 2 girls in his room. It appeared that they had found something to do while their boyfriends were away deep-sea fishing. Anthony persuaded them to form a double team with him, and then another notion occurred to me. If I could get the timing right, I'd leave home while Abigail stayed here to figure out what had happened. I knew she'd try to give me water again tonight, so I'd stage the scene and pretend I was unconscious then. With any hope she'd meet Anthony at the bar, dance, drink, and return to her room. If I could sneak 1 pill into each of their drinks at the bar at the end of the night, they'd be passed out by the time they arrived in his room. The timing had to be impeccable, however, in real life, faultless planning is unusual. The second component of the plan was to videotape Anthony's most recent exploits on the VCR. I must admit that I was a little jealous of the jerk and his ability to persuade 2 really attractive women. I had several DVR CDs and made 2 copies of his day's events. It was just an issue of determining which rooms to leave them in. I also saved a copy of everything I had recorded up to that time on another DVR as backup. I went down to the front desk and was able to send the CD to my brother Frank's residence with a note requesting that he not play it or inform anyone that I had sent it to him. This was in case my plan failed or Abigail and Anthony discovered what I was doing and threatened to hurt me if I was destroyed. At the very least, the DVD I sent my brother would show the authorities who was responsible. Checking the time, I noticed Abigail was about to end her duties at the spa, so I decided to wander around the resort to see where those 2 women and their partners were staying. I'm sure their boyfriends would be curious to know what they were doing. While deep sea fishing, I soon found the 2 women I was looking for heading away from the pool and holding towels. As I followed them, I knew they were going to their rooms, and sure enough, I noticed that they went into different rooms next to one another. That saved me from a portion of my plan. Now, if everything lined up and Abigail and Anthony followed the same pattern as the night before, I could utterly ruin the rest of the vacation. By tomorrow morning, I returned to my hotel to call the airline and find out when the earliest flight for the next morning would be. The most I could learn was 10 a.m., which was later than I had intended. I did, however, book my ticket. I immediately returned to the front desk and informed them that my wife and I needed to leave the next morning for family reasons and would be leaving at 8 a.m. They sympathized and wished me the best. I thanked them and returned to my room. I was now completely committed to my strategy, no matter what. If things did not go as planned, I would still board a plane in the morning and arrive home before Abigail. At the very least, I'd be able to mess her up before she returned. But even if everything went as planned, she'd be imprisoned here for a few days, if not weeks, before returning home, and that would give me enough time to completely screw her over. The plan was straightforward. First, make Abigail believe her water plan succeeded and pretend to fall asleep so she and Anthony may spend the evening together. Second, I'll return to the bar, monitoring them and waiting for the right moment to sneak the substance Abigail tried to use on me into their drinks if I time it. Or they should pass out before they reach his room or when they get back into it. The time should be ideal. Third, after they're in the room, I'll enter move Abigail back to our room and then return to grab everything Anthony has from him. I began removing his wallet, cash, passport, credit cards, and clothing as well as whatever else he had brought with him on the trip. Then I found it. Anthony went into the rooms of the 2 ladies Anthony had been doing it with earlier in the day and slipped the DVR discs under their doors, hoping that one of their partners would see them first and play them back. I'm sure they wouldn't be pleased to learn what their ladies had been up to while they were gone. Anthony's room number is plainly displayed on the video, so they should have no trouble finding it. Fifth, because of Abigail, what I did to Anthony was take everything she brought with her on the trip and left her with only her clothing and pocketbook. I would leave a letter in her empty handbag to let her know who was to blame, so everything was prepared, and now all I had to do was wait for the players to do their tasks. Abigail returned to the room about 5:30 p.m., more relaxed and radiant than before. It hurts me to think that she had damaged our marriage and that I would never be with this stunning woman again. Edward, thank you very much for the spa experience. It was incredible. I feel like a new lady. She was beaming. I'm very glad. You liked it when I first informed you about it. You weren't too excited, but I'm delighted you enjoyed it. I just wanted to let you know how much I adore you. I watched her flinch again, but tears sprang from her eyes. Thank you once. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I also love you this time. She spoke with a lot more passion and emotion. Anytime, darling. We have 7 dinner reservations tonight. Let us rest before preparing for dinner. She nodded and went into the restroom, carrying her purse with her. She came out a few minutes later with 2 bottles of water and offered one to me. "Drink this. I want to go dancing tonight. So you should start moisturizing now." She gave me a wink. "Okay, please let me use the restroom first." I laughed. I repeated the previous steps once inside. I emptied the bottle and replaced it with water from one of the ones on the counter. I flushed the toilet to make it appear as if it was time for me to go and return to the bedroom. I kept drinking the water, and after about 15 minutes, I pretended to sleep soon. I was snoring, pretending to be asleep, and watching Abigail prepare for her final date with Anthony. Unaware that she was doing so, she entered the bathroom and started taking a shower. I instantly got out of bed and took her phone to check what her lover had sent her. "Abigail is unable to go this afternoon. Edward purchased me a spa. Package can't say no to that. I have other plans for the day. Abigail, are we still on for today?" "Yeah," after reading that nonsense, I wasn't as irritated because I knew the finish was approaching. All I had to do was follow them to the bar, watch them dance for a few hours, and then offer them a drink. Easy, perhaps not as much. I searched her purse for the keycard to Anthony's room. I slid it inside my pocket and organized everything. Abigail took a little more time to collect herself before doing something absolutely unexpected. She crouched down beside me on the bed and gently touched my cheek. "Baby, after this week, I'll be completely yours. I swear I just need to get this out of my thoughts before we start a family. I wish I could say you'd understand, but I have to do this. These days are for me. I wish I could tell you, but I know you'll leave, and I need you right now more than you realize. I adore you so much, but I really must do this. I truly love you." I do. At first I assumed she had realized I was awake, but then I realized she was attempting to alleviate her guilt. But it was a little too late. She was quickly dressed and headed out the door. As soon as the door closed, I was out of bed, clothed and keeping up with her. They ended up going back to the same pub they were at the night before. It was busier than the night before, and I even saw 2 women with their beach boys. If my plan worked, they wouldn't meet until the next morning. I found myself in the exact area I had been the previous night. I made myself as comfy as possible before starting to film the evening's happenings with my trusty camera. The evening unfolded just as I had imagined, and soon the 2 of them were sitting at a table, talking and laughing. It was becoming late, and I knew I'd need to buy them beverages soon. I dashed towards the bar, making sure neither of them spotted me. When I arrived, I discovered an empty seat close to the waitresses who were placing and accepting drink orders. Taking a seat, I placed an order for a beer. I kept an eye on the 2 of them to ensure that they did not notice me as I observed them. I noticed a waitress approaching their table to collect their drink orders. She returned to the bar and informed the bartender of her requirements as soon as she received their orders. I was fortunate that this was her only order. I listened to everything she said to the bartender, and when he went to make the drink order, I summoned another bartender over and ordered the identical beverages. The bartender placed the beverages on the waitress tray. She was preoccupied with a conversation with another waitress. The beverages were delivered to me. I paid for them, then took 1 shot glass, held it away from the edge of the bar, and broke open one of the capsules, adding it to the drink while stirring the powder in to help it blend. It fizzed little, but seemed all right after combining with the drink. I repeated the process with the second capsule and was now ready to transition. Taking a drink in each hand, I began to push past the waitress, keeping my body between her and the bar until I could switch. I moved quickly and happily. The pub was crowded enough that no one noticed. I walked past the waitress and turned to deliver the drinks to the delighted couple. I promptly exited the bar and returned to my position outside to watch and wait. The waitress delivered their drinks, and I observed the scenario. hoping I had chosen the proper moment. It was slightly past 1 a.m., so if everything went as planned, they'd be out strolling until 1 a.m. or so, which worked wonderfully with the remainder of my strategy. All they had to do was finish their drinks and return to Anthony's room before passing asleep. They sat there sipping their beverages, and I became apprehensive. What if they don't finish their beverages? Anthony then leaned over and spoke to Abigail. She grinned, and both of them quickly finished what was remained of their drinks before leaving the pub. Thank God I moved fast behind them, because they appeared to be in a hurry to get back into the room. Abigail had begun to stumble and appeared to be having difficulty walking at this point. Anthony grasped her hand, wrapped his arm over her neck, and supported her. Anthony had begun to wobble by the time they arrived at his room. By the time they arrived at his door, she could hardly stand on her feet, and he was becoming increasingly shaky. He groped for the key card, and after a few feeble efforts was able to open the door and enter the room. The door shut. I waited a few minutes before retrieving the key card I had taken from Abigail's purse and opening the door. I could hear Anthony's voice as I entered the room. "What's wrong with you? Baby, you didn't drink much." He was speaking in a slur as I entered the room. I understood he was going to be hung over. Abigail was unconscious, face down on the bed. Anthony was shaking her, attempting to rouse her up. "Come on now, baby, it's time to get something done." He glanced around and noticed me walking in. "Hey, who are you?" He started to straighten up and nearly fell down. "I am merely her husband, loser. Why don't you pass out like a nice guy and let me get her out of here?" As if on cue, he gently sank to the floor and stayed there, moving closer to the bed. I began searching for his cell phone, which was laying on the floor next to him, and took it in my hands. I wanted to see what messages and photographs he had on there. I soon found myself browsing through hundreds of photos, the most of which were benign enough, but then I realized he had not paid. He had a folder filled with dozens of photographs of ladies I didn't recognize. Most of the women, however, as I began to go through the pictures, I saw a few photos of Abigail. Some of them were female instructors at Shan in school, while others were the wives of multiple male teachers. That's quite fascinating. Anthony appears to be quite the player in terms of other men's spouses. This was going to end badly. I went through his contact list and decided that these images, as well as those of my soon-to-be ex-wife, should be made available to everyone on his list. It took me a few minutes to tag and email all of the images to everyone, including the husbands of the wives he had photographed. When he returned home, he was met with unwelcome surprise. I transferred Abigail's images and movies to her phone, and then from her phone too. And mine, I later used them for personal reasons. Some could call it blackmail. After turning off his phone, I began gathering all of his belongings, including clothes, toiletries, and other items that he had brought with him on the vacation, and put them carelessly into a suitcase. I also searched his pockets and took all of his cash, wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and passport. I knew it would be impossible for him to leave the island without a passport. After I finished filling his suitcase, I turned to face Abigail. She was still laying face down on the bed, one leg hanging over the edge. I carefully flipped her over onto her back, then lifted her up in my arms and took her inside my room. I put her on our bed and returned to the loser's room to retrieve all of his belongings. I retained his phone, wallet, and cash, because I felt I should be compensated for them. After inspecting his room, I ensured he had nothing to take with him. I even removed the shoes he was wearing, and on my way back to the room, I saw a garbage can at the resort and threw his suitcase and shoes in it, covering them with debris so they would not be discovered. Once I was back in the room, I began packing my luggage as well as Abigail's suitcase, whose contents I handled with the same care. Anthony, I was just going to leave her there with her clothing, purse, and an empty wallet containing only the note I had left. As I finished packing, I realized it was 4 a.m., and I needed to be at the airport by 9. Abigail would be unconscious until at least 12. As she had finished drinking around 2 a.m., Anthony, I anticipated, would arrive about 10 a.m., and I would be able to depart before either of them awoke. As I left the room, I had one more thing to accomplish. I quickly grabbed the 2 DVR discs I had manufactured earlier and made my way to the rooms where the 2 women and their boyfriend were staying. I slid the disc under each of their doors before returning to my room. When I glanced at Abigail, sleeping sweetly on the bed, I was filled with feelings of enormous loss and despair. I desperately wanted to create a family with her, but she had other intentions, and I couldn't forgive her walking about the room. I checked to make sure I had packed everything. Then I grabbed Abigail's suitcase and returned to the dumpster where I had dumped Anthony's suitcase and her Viper. Back into the room, I searched through Abigail's purse to ensure it was empty and included no money, credit cards, or passports. I wanted to make sure it was as tough for her to come home as it had been for Anthony. Take a seat in one of the room's 2 chairs. I slumped to the floor, weary, but instantly considered what I would do. Once I arrived home, first, I'll empty our bank accounts, pay off, and then cancel all of our credit cards. Then I'd pack everything I owned and move it out of our house. I knew I'd have to locate a storage facility to keep it all, but I didn't care. I just wanted out of our house and this sham marriage. Before I knew it, I was napping. It was almost 7 o'clock a.m. When I awoke and got out of the recliner I was sleeping in, I walked up to the bed, glanced at Abigail, and gently lifted her up in my arms to carry her out of the room. I walked down to the pool and left Abigail on a lounge chair. I didn't want her to be present when they came to clean the room and prepare it for the next visitors to return. I gathered my bags and checked around one final time to ensure I had everything before leaving. I still held Anthony's phone, but suddenly an idea struck me. I returned to the pool and grabbed up Abigail's phone. I began sending out these photos and movies to everyone on her contact list, with a few exceptions. Her nieces and nephews were too young to see these items, but I was confident her mother, father, sisters, and co-workers would be interested. I went up to the front desk and requested a piece of duct tape. I removed the battery from her phone, covered the contacts with a little piece of duct tape, and then reinserted the battery. It appeared like her battery had died. I also made sure she didn't have a wire for charging your phone if you didn't have any money. It would take a time for her phone to work. It was roughly 8 a.m. I overheard yelling and screaming. It was the boyfriend of one of the 2 women Anthony was seen with yesterday. Apparently their ex-boyfriends had seen the footage. I snuck beneath their door. You are the fool. You can inform your family that the wedding has been called off, and I don't want to see you again, jerk. You can find your way home. A guy was ranting at his girlfriend while his girlfriend pleaded with him. The other guy merely gazed at him. Stony fade, baby. Please don't leave me. I apologized. It was a stupid error. Furthermore, you retaliated. She started crying. You're a cheat. Go back to your new boyfriend. But I don't think things will improve from here. He stated it so coldly that I trembled in horror. I'm curious what they did to poor old Anthony, so I guess I will never. No, the next sound I heard was an ambulance's siren halting in front of the house. I realized the superintendent had come out of his office and was immediately leading the paramedics down the walkway to Anthony's room. I sincerely hoped he was okay as others gathered to see what was causing such excitement. I casually got a cab and drove to the airport. When I turned on my phone, I realized there was a voicemail message, so I called it up. I listened to my brother Frank's message. Edward, what is going on over there? I got a lot of shots of Abigail. What is going on? Are you aware of this? Call me as soon as you received this message. When I arrived at the airport and waited to board the plane, I contacted him back and explained the issue. Abigail was having a good time with Anthony while we were on vacation, and she was attempting to become pregnant by him. My brother was astonished and thought I was joking at first, but I told him to view the video again. He apologized for what had happened and stated that if I needed anything I could call him. I thanked him, hung up, and soon found myself traveling. Home alone, turning on Anthony's phone. As soon as I landed, I discovered a dozen voicemails and more than 30 SMS, threatening to harm him. Apparently, the photos and movies I supplied were not popular after I picked up my belongings. I drove home after retrieving my automobile from the long-term parking lot. As I drove home, I began to plot what I would do next. Divorce was an option, but I knew she'd get half of everything, which did not appeal to me. She cheats, but still gets it in the divorce. It did not seem fair. While I drove, another idea began to shape in my mind, and I mentally made a list of things I would need and how to do it. She damaged our marriage, and I was going to make her life miserable. When I arrived home, I called my brother and asked him if he could assist me move my belongings out of the house over the next few days. I wanted to finish it before Abigail returned, so she'd come home to an empty house. When I eventually switched on my phone, there were more than 20 voicemails and a dozen SMS. Many were from Abigail's sister, who wanted to know what was going on and why Abigail wasn't responding her calls. Other members of Abigail's family asked similar inquiries. I was relieved that Abigail had left no voicemails or texts, implying that her phone was not working, and she had not yet understood what had happened. I grinned as I pictured her finally getting her phone to operate and then seeing all of the text and voice messages asking about the photographs and videos she had sent from it. She was about to receive a very bad surprise. The first thing I did was deactivate all of our credit cards and transfer the funds from our joint bank account to my personal account. Then I began packing up my clothes and other personal belongings. I wanted to save all of the presents Abigail had given me throughout the years we were going to, and then throw it away unless they were actually worth something. Then I'd either sell them online or go to a pawn shop as soon. As I arrived home, my house phone was unplugged, so anyone attempting to contact me had to dial my cell phone. It was around 11 p.m. when I finally looked at my phone. I noticed multiple messages and voicemails from Abigail. She seems to have been able to get her phone to operate again. The first few messages asked, "Where are you? Why did you leave me? Here, are you all right?" I think I was robbed when she received the messages. The tone changed, and I'm sure she received numerous SMS and voicemails about the photos sent from her phone to everyone on her contact list. Why did you treat me this way? Couldn't we have talked first? I simply disregarded the rest of her messages, believing that it would only irritate her more. The following day was incredibly hectic. I had no idea when Abigail would be able to return home, so I had to act quickly. First, I went shopping again to box up the rest of my possessions and rent a large enough storage container. Then I went to the bank to ensure there wasn't much money left in our joint account. I moved the balance to my business account, which I intended to liquidate run away with the money, but I still had some tasks to complete before I could depart for good. We lived in a small house. We chose to start small and expand as our family expanded. It was a modest 2-bedroom with 2 bedrooms, a small bathroom, and a small kitchen. There's nothing spectacular. And I had a home remodeling firm, and we were really trying to make this place exceptional. Now I had different plans, and I was rushing about town, gathering everything I needed to make Abigail's arrival at the house unforgettable. Since I was in the remodeling industry, I was familiar with building load-bearing walls and other related topics. Armed with this knowledge, I was about to start on a major renovation of our house, but not in the typical way. Later that morning, my brother Frank arrived with his pickup truck, and after we discussed my position, We began packing his vehicle with all of my belongings. It took nearly 5 hours and 3 visits to the storage unit, but I was finally moved in that evening. I didn't bother telling Frank about my intentions for the house or the surprise Abigail had planned for me. I knew he'd attempt to talk me out of it, so I didn't tell him. He did, however, inquire about my plans for the near future, presumably too. Nick, go out of town and leave this nightmarish marriage behind. I'm not going to file for divorce, but I won't be. Around when she returns, she can have the house, but that is all I will give her. Frank shook his head. That won't work. She'll simply hire a lawyer and track you down. Get it over with divorce. That cheating scumbag trying to run will only make things worse. I understand that when she catches up with you, you will be angry and upset. However, do not let your emotions dictate your decisions. Get yourself together, hire a lawyer, and pay her half. No, I know that jerk cheated on me, tried to have a baby with that loser, and then pretended it was mine. She deserves nothing. That's exactly what she'll get. See, I'm not divorcing her. No, I'm just going to leave her with no money in the bank and with all her dirty laundry on display. Frank knew he couldn't change my mind. I'm a stubborn person, and there's not much that can persuade me otherwise. He left, but not before encouraging me to think about it and not make any hasty decisions. I had thought about it since I saw her kissing her lover. It was time to put my plan into action. I began working on the house that night and continued until the morning. I still didn't know when Abigail would be back, so I had to work quickly. The snow helped me out. Another significant storm appeared to be on its way, forcing the closure of multiple airports. Flights back and forth would be cancelled, giving me extra time to accomplish my remodeling job. Another benefit of this store form was the extra 8 to 12 in of snow it brought. There was still a foot of snow on the ground and roofs, which would have helped my idea succeed. I rarely answered the phone because I had only been back for 2 days and noticed that the majority of the calls were from Abigail. I finally decided to pick up the phone and ask her for some information. Nothing more. Please listen, baby. It was an error, simply a massive, stupid mistake on my side. I didn't intend for things to progress this far. I am willing to do whatever it takes, but kindly excuse me. I could hear her crying, but it had no impact on me. I wanted nothing to do with her anymore, but for the time being I needed to remain calm, offer her a glimmer of hope, and then rip it from her at the proper time. Abigail, you've harmed me more deeply than anyone else has. I'm not sure if I can forgive you or trust you again. I just want to know why. Why did you treat me this way to us? Do you not love me? Am I not enough for you? I spoke calmly, but with a sad tone in my voice. I wanted to shout over the phone that she was a cheat and a stupid that I never wanted to see again. I needed to inform her that we had a chance to be together again. Let me explain. Baby, it was meaningless, and he did not mean anything. You mean the world to me. You are my life, the reason I live. Please, God, forgive me. She started crying. I hesitated a few minutes before saying, baby, I'm just not sure I adore you, but you broke my heart. I doubt we can solve it. No, sweetie, we can fix it. And if we can make it through this, we'll have an even stronger love and bond. Please, darling, wait until I arrive home so we can discuss. I could detect desperation in her voice. I honestly don't know when. Are you returning? There is one problem. I do not have a passport or a plane ticket. My sister is sending money to me right now. All of my credit cards were stolen. Please call the credit card companies and request that they cancel my cards immediately. It's amazing how she moved from pleading to be taken back to requesting that her credit cards be cancelled. What an impressive piece of work. Okay, I will do it right now. So you don't know when you'll get home. In a few days. I believe I spoke with the U.S. consulate here, and they are going to issue me a new passport, so contact me when you're getting ready to depart, okay? Yes, I will still. Yes, I adore you. I will. See you when you get home. I hung up so she wouldn't come back for a few days. Great. I figured that would give me enough time to complete all of the home improvement projects and do a few things to help me start my new life without her. The next day, Frank called to check on me and invited me over for dinner. I agreed because I hadn't had a home-cooked supper in over a week. I was living on pizza and Chinese food, and after finishing my conversation with Frank, I assured him that I would not do anything rash. Abigail then made a call. "Hi, babe. I just found out I'll be getting a new passport in a few days now. All I need is a plane ticket home. I'll be able to fly in a few days, and if I catch an early flight, I'll arrive home around late afternoon. Will you come meet me at the airport? I really want us to talk as soon as possible." "That's a bad idea, Abigail. You should have your sister pick you up and drive you home. We can talk when you arrive." I just let her follow me. By the time she arrived home, I'd be at least 100 mil away. "Okay, baby, I adore you, and I'm confident that if you give me a chance, we can get through this. Yeah, sure, we'll talk." And then see, I am not making any promises. I lied as much as she did to me. I now knew when she would be home, giving me enough time to do a few more things to cover my tracks before leaving town. First, I sold my work truck and purchased a used truck in good condition, but registered it in the name of a friend. Second, I had to inform my employees that I was closing my business. Due to my impending divorce, I apologized for warning them, but I couldn't leave without explaining what had happened and why. I then called an old college friend who lives in Colorado. When we graduated from college, he invited me to come and do business with him. He explained that because there were both winter and summer homes, we would have year-round jobs. He was glad to hear from me, but he was surprised by what had happened between me and Abigail, as he had known her when we were dating and always thought we were a good match. I inquired if his college offer was still valid or if he required a highly skilled handyman. He stated that he has more work now, that marijuana laws have changed, and that his workload has tripled over the last year, and I would be very happy to come and work for him. I asked if it could be done unofficially, as I wanted Abigail not to find out where I had gone and that she wouldn't get any money from me. Everything was set, and all I had to do was leave. Abigail called me several times a day to let me know that she loved me and asked me to forgive her. She also let me know daily when she was coming home and that I would be in better shape when she returned. The day came when she was due home. I packed up my new truck, and the house was cleared of all my belongings. Everything that was left belonged to Abigail, or didn't care about me. I left very early in the morning, as I wanted to get out of town without anyone noticing anything. I asked the neighbor across the street to do me a favor and write down when Abigail was coming home. I told him I would call and let him know what time she would be home, since I had a surprise for her. He had no idea what was going on and that she and I were having marital problems. He happily agreed and said he would wait for my call the next day. Everything was ready to go as I drove out of town and headed south to my new life. Without Abigail, it would take me at least 2 days of driving to get to my friend's house, and Abigail would be home by then. As I drove, I felt less angry and more peaceful than I had in the past week. Ever since I had seen Abigail and Anthony together at the pool, I felt like my life had been flushed down the toilet, and now I was starting to pull myself out of that cesspool of despair. Around noon, Abigail called and said she would be home tomorrow around 4. In the afternoon, she asked again if I would come pick her up at the airport, but I told her I had some things to do and that I would be home after her. She could just let me in when she got there. I then called my neighbor and asked him to be on standby with a video camera to film the surprise I had in store for my wife. The next day I was in Colorado, went only an hour away from my friend's house when I got a call from Abigail. The house, it just collapsed, probably because of the snow. I had just put the key in the door and turned it when I heard a huge crack in the roof. Fell in my God, our house is gone. She started crying. Abigail, don't worry. I'm sure your parents are still waiting for you in your room. As for me, I've already made other arrangements, I said cheerfully. What are you talking about? Our house is gone. How can you be so happy about that? Now she was starting to get angry good. My remodeling went exactly as I planned. I rigged the house to collapse in on itself. When she opened the door, I installed temporary braces in the basement and then cut all the posts in the floor with a chainsaw the lock on. The front door was wired to a switch that turned on a winch I bought at a pawn shop for a very cheap price then. With a pulley and ropes attached to temporary braces, she turned the key, turned on the winch, and our house came. Down, you see, my dear, our house didn't collapse on itself because of the snow, but I had a hand in it. You see, I did too. Our house, what you did to our marriage. Good luck finding a new place to live. As for me, I'm almost to my new home at that. Point, I left her and called my neighbor. Still, you won't believe what just happened. Your house just collapsed it. Probably couldn't handle all that snow, but I guess there wasn't much of it, at least not enough to do that much damage. I videotaped the whole thing, and thankfully, your wife is okay. She was trying to open the door when it happened, and then like bang, and she just fell on top of herself. He was so excited I asked him to email me the video when he had a chance, and I wanted to keep a copy of it. After talking to him, I disconnected my phone and continued on my way to my new life epilogue. It's been almost 3 years. And now, and I've settled into a comfortable life here in Colorado, I keep in touch with a few friends in Minnesota and keep up with what's going on. I didn't want to contact family members directly as I was sure they would let Abigail know where I was living. It seems Abigail got her wish and was pregnant with Anthony's baby. For a while, she told everyone that he was mine, and I couldn't be a father and would run away a coward. Even my mother believed her because she wanted a grandchild. I contacted a friend who in turn contacted my brother and told him to get Abigail to do a DNA test on the baby and my brother. If I was a distant relative, I would have a close match with my brother. If I wasn't distant, there would be no match. Like an idiot, she agreed. The results came back. And my mother kicked her out of the house, yelling at her to never show up on the doorstep with that child of hers. As for Anthony, it seems he took quite a beating from those 2 guys at the resort and was in the hospital for over a week before he could get home. When he finally made it home, there were several other gentlemen, or should I say, ex-husbands, waiting for him to add what those 2 guys didn't add. He has since town for parts unknown, but rumor has it that he can't do it anymore. Looks like his days as a player are over. Thank you for taking time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this article, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a tale to tell about your someone else's circumstance, please don't hesitate to contact me. Take care.